NFL Draft coming up on Thursday, round number 1. And as we do each year, we break it down for you. And I can't think of anybody better to do that than Dave Schuman, known as America's football combine guru. And he is widely regarded as the top evaluator of football players, and his national underclassmen combines have become the largest combine tour system in football. I guess the obvious first question, Dave, is overall, what does this year's draft class look like?
Well, I think this year's draft class is among the deepest of all time. The biggest contributing factor is the number of underclassmen that are entering the draft. I think there's over 100 that declared this year. So I think that's contributed to a very, very deep NFL group.
Is there any one particular position that's stronger than others in this class?
There's actually a few positions that are very strong. Quarterback, as everybody's been talking about, is a very interesting and strong group. The offensive line is very deep in this class. The defensive line, in particular defensive tackles, are very deep in this class. Wide receivers is a very deep group as well. So, I mean, you got 4 solid positions, and then DB is probably the 5th position that you see tremendous diversity and deepness in that position.
You know, we talk about underclassmen every year in the draft, and I'm just wondering that when you look at the underclassmen, there is a lot of danger there, is it not? I mean, how fully developed they are as a player, and you think about the step up, the speed of the game at the next level, and that you're not going up against, if you're a senior or let's say a junior going up against a sophomore, that's not the same thing as being a rookie going up against a 10-year veteran.
Correct. One of the interesting things of the draft now is the longevity of the NFL career. And I think that's a big contributing factor. These players want to be able to get in to the NFL at a younger age so they can extend the life of their career, knowing that at certain ages players start to deteriorate. And that's one of the biggest contributing factors to players coming in early. There is a difference as far as maybe physicality and those between the younger guys and the older guys, but what they make up for in it is really their ability to recover and come back versus a lot of the veterans who begin to come out of the league in a short time period of 4 to 5 years. And if they know their career is 4 to 5 years, and if they're lucky, they can extend out to 7, 8, then the guys are trying to get in earlier to get 1 or 2 more years in.
Any underclassmen that you have your eye on that might be a surprise, a pleasant surprise for teams?
Pleasant surprise for teams. There's a multitude of underclassmen. I think Odell Beckham is one guy that is a wide receiver, I think, that stands out. Eric Ebron at tight end is another guy that stands out that people didn't think about a lot early on from a draft standpoint. Obviously, the obvious guys you talk about, you know, Johnny Manziel and Jadvian Clowney, that are coming out early that are obviously going to be high-impact players.
Let's talk about some of the quarterbacks because, as you said, it is a deep quarterback class here. And let me get your thoughts on a couple of these players. Teddy Bridgewater.
Teddy Bridgewater, really interesting because his draft stock has been dropping, so he's probably going to end up being a steal in the second round somewhere for somebody. Struggled in some of his workouts, which was a surprise, because at one point people thought he was going to be the number 1 pick. So I think he's a guy that has all the quote-unquote on-paper skills, but didn't do it in the workouts, so people have some questions about what he'll be able to do when game time comes around.
Yeah, you know, I've heard the same thing about him, and I'm just a little bit surprised. It's hard to evaluate somebody from what they've done in games because he performed very well in games. You're absolutely right about that, Dave. But then when he got into the pro day, he struggled. Why do you think that was? What was it that he wasn't doing during his pro day workouts?
Well, accuracy of his throws and strength of his arm. And I think that contributes to the fact that probably feel that he has some level of flawed mechanics, which, as you may know, that when quarterbacks come in with some flawed mechanics and all of a sudden have weak throws intermittently in their drills, it is a clear sign that there could be a problem. And if you have one weak throw in a game, you know that's an interception that's going the other way for 7 points. So you really can't afford to have several of those or a multitude of those in a workout. And that's really what happened with Teddy Bridgewater that raised a lot of questions.
When you take a look around at teams that need quarterbacks, obviously the one drafting in the number one spot, which is Houston, needs a quarterback as well. And yet, when you look at Johnny Manziel, there are some people who are, say he's the next thing that's going to be big in the National Football League. Others have some question. I remember back when Peyton was coming out after 4 years at Tennessee, and there was the question of Peyton Manning or Ryan Leaf. And Leaf was just a complete bust, even though he'd had a good college career up at Washington State here. Tell me a little bit about what the questions are or the challenges are for a team thinking about or deciding to draft Johnny Manziel.
Well, the system you're going to play him in, number one, what type of system are you going to use? A lot of people point to the fact, they say, oh, he should run a system like Russell Wilson does at Seattle or what Colin Kaepernick does at San Francisco. But I actually look at him more like Drew Brees. Drew Brees was a undersized guy who threw a lot of balls in college, moved around in the pocket, had good speed. Now, he doesn't have the speed that Johnny Manziel has, but he would roll out and throw and try to create space for himself to throw, make plays happen. And I think if you utilize Johnny Manziel in that type of system, where he could be a gunslinger and make smart decisions because he's got a good brain on his head, then you could have him in a situation where he's very, very effective. The questions are, I think the biggest questions really still come from when he won the Heisman and kind of his behavior more than what his performance has been, because his performance this year has been nothing short of outstanding. So, and in any of the workouts, he's been outstanding. He's not shied away from any challenges. So I really think it just still stems really in a lot of people's minds is his maturity level.
As well as I do, there have been those quarterbacks that have come into the National Football League, one in particular that I remember in which they said he had $1 million arm and a 10-cent head. And I think you're absolutely right about the question about his maturity as he goes. But has something changed in the National Football League that coaches are now more comfortable with their quarterbacks running out of the pocket? You and I both remember that time where they just did not want their quarterbacks to be getting out of the pocket and taking a beating.
Right, and I think the size of the quarterback definitely dictates how much you want him getting out of the pocket and moving, and that's where Johnny Manziel's a little slight, and so Michael Vick, you could even say, is a little bit slight, and that's where the danger kind of comes in. The obvious reason is that defensive ends are so fast, so quick, so hard to handle. Defensive tackles are so physical that if a guy can move and run smartly at the right times, he can be very, very effective. And what you notice that Russell Wilson and Colin Kaepernick do is not that they run a lot, is that when they run, it is the right time to run. And they make great decisions on that. And that is highly effective now in the NFL.
Certainly size is not a factor with Blake Bortles out of Central Florida. He stands 6'5", but the knock on him apparently is he doesn't have a great arm. Didn't we hear that about Joe Montana at one time as well? What are your thoughts about him?
Well, they still say that Joe Montana doesn't have a great arm, but he's got, 4 or 5 full rings? I don't know. I think the arm thing is overrated as long as he can make all the throws that are necessary on time. It really becomes a factor when there's questions about can he make X throw, and can he throw the deep comeback and those kind of things, or when he gets himself into a flat-footed situation, can he still get the ball out there? Those kind of things become a question. Blake Bortles is a big guy. The more he learns to utilize his legs, the less he has to worry about his arm strength because he's got a lot of weight and size behind him.
We only have a little bit over a minute before we have to break here, but Derek Carr is the other name, and the other quarterback people are high on. His brother, of course, was a bust, but he apparently has a better arm. So how do you evaluate him in about a minute?
He's very much like his brother. I just think more of it has to do with circumstances. He's got a very quick release. He's been in the system that he has to make a lot of quick decisions, so he's more NFL ready from that standpoint. It's a passing-style offense. He's a guy that could come in right away and start. I do think it's interesting that he's as high as he is because his brother was considered, I don't know if I would use the word bust, but he did not live up to his draft status. So, and I think that is interesting because I've seen family quarterbacks time and time again struggle when it's the next guy. If they're successful, the brother's successful, usually then he's successful. And you look at the Mannings, and that's indeed the case. So, but you can look at, I forget the quarterback, Clausen. The Clausen family, they seem to struggle when they got to the NFL. So, I'm hoping Carr that's not the case. He shows quick release. He has played in pro-style system.
We're talking about the